I'm not sure what you're saying. It didn't pop up on mine, so I won't worry about it at this point.
All right. All right. I'm here on the phone with EMMANUEL Shahid bin Abraham, a gentleman that I've been known for a long time. And tonight's conversation is mass incarceration. How you doing, Mr. Abraham?
I'm feeling fine, sir. How are you?
I'm great.
I want to thank you and your listening audience for allowing me to come on and be your guest for this evening on such a dear topic to me.
I appreciate having you. And Mr. Abraham, we want to jump into it because there's been a big conversation in this presidential race talking about mass incarceration. And one of the questions that we want to jump out and start out with, which was asking you, how do mass incarceration in America and how does it affect you?
Well, mass incarceration is a very dear subject, life discussion, reality that exists throughout America and throughout the world. The alarming thing is that for America to be this superpower that she is, we have the largest prison population than any population throughout the world, and predominantly per capita, African American, black, and brown far exceed any other ethnic group in America. And that is not only alarming and disturbing, but it's a reality that we in this country must come to grips with and begin to address. Mass incarceration hit my home very dearly when I look at my mother, my father, my brothers, my sister, and only I, out of my siblings, never been in prison or incarcerated. So for me, I have spent my life fighting and experiencing this kind of pain and suffering firsthand. So mass incarceration, and when we start talking about rehabilitation, that's kind of like weird, because how could you rehabilitate people who have not been habilitated in the first place, or the opportunity to be habilitated?
If you don't mind, Shahid, one of the things that I read in your biography is that not only did your mother was incarcerated, your father was incarcerated, your brother who died in the prison system was incarcerated for 15 years or more, and now you have a brother who's doing 30 years to life as we speak in the penitentiary. Seeing that this was like a brother that was 1 year younger than you, and you have moved on to do some great things, receiving an award from Governor Bush as the 16 points of life, I think it was, and also doing some great things in the community to fight against the drug epidemic and change what's going on in these underserved communities. How does it feel with you exceeding the things that young black boys coming out of inner cities usually don't achieve, seeing your brother being incarcerated?
Well, my brother, 1 year older than me, by the name of Akbar, he did 15 years in Royal State Prison, which is in New Jersey. Came home, got a hit, and went back to prison, and he had more dope or got more heroin in prison than he did on the streets of Newark, New Jersey. I'm from Newark. I'm not from Brick City. I'm from Newark. I'm a Newarker. I'm not a Brick Cityer. There's a difference. And so he he was able to obtain more dope in prison, and then he became a heroin addict in prison and attracted the AIDS virus. And on his next hit that he took, he went into Northern State Prison in New Jersey, and there he died of the AIDS virus. Whenever I wanted to see my father, for the most part, I had to go to the penitentiaries. And my father spent many days talking to me through the prison bars, and fathering me and nurturing me. And it was very interesting because my father was the most brilliant human being that I ever known in my life. But I never went to the movies with my father. I never went to the parks with my father. My father never, he taught me in a very young age. He taught me how to fight and karate and box. But as I became a younger man and a teenager, I didn't have those kind of opportunities that my sons have today. And my mother left me homeless at the age of 14, and then I experienced homelessness, sleeping in abandoned cars and vacant buildings and cardboard houses and eating out of the garbage can and wherever I could find a place to lay and rest my head. And so that became that cycle because my mother became a heroin addict and she started to go to prison. And the first woman's penitentiary that I can recall that she went to was in Alexander, Virginia, I believe. And then she did a couple of bids in Etna Mayhem, which was known then as Clinton. And I remember pleading with a judge in Essex County, New Jersey, because I was a correction officer and a sheriff officer there. And that's very interesting, too, because while I was a sheriff's officer and the jail was at 60 Nelson Place, I had the day room assignment between the 6th and 7th floor of the county jail in Essex County, New Jersey, and I had to feed my father and my brother as inmates in the day room. It was one day my father came up as I was the day room officer handing the meals through the bars, and he called my name, and he always called my name in a certain way, and I looked up and he said, "Do not put your head down and don't shed a tear." And so 2 days later I came, and my older brother Akbar was arrested and placed on the same floor as my father. And what was interesting, Brother Rob, I was a day room officer and for the Essex County Corrections Department, and there I was feeding my father and my brother their breakfast and lunch because I was the breakfast and lunch day room officer. And on the 6th floor that controlled the gates for the 6th and 7th floor up into the day room for the inmates to come and eat, my stepfather was the controlling officer of the gates on the 6th floor of my youngest brother. So his father was a correction officer. So there was some trying times for me in my life. And so even when my mother was incarcerated, I pleaded with Judge Rocco. It was a judge in Essex County named Judge Rocco, because he was going to sentence my mother on one of her bids 160 years for her criminal activity. And so my mother went to Clinton. When my brother Akbar went to Royal and then Northern State, he attracted the AIDS virus and he died in Northern State Prison, actually at St. Francis Prison, St. Francis Hospital on the 6th floor in Trenton, New Jersey. And on the day my brother died, was interesting because the actor James Earl Jones had came to New Jersey and came to Trenton, New Jersey to do a documentary and narrate a documentary on taking back our community. And it was focused on my activities in boarding up crack houses and shutting down crack houses. And also that came after President George Bush, who created the 1,000 points of light. And he appointed me then at that time as the 6th point of light out of 1,000 point of light. So when my brother died of the AIDS virus, we buried him we used Perry's funeral home in Newark to bury him. And 112 days later, we were back there burying my father because he died of the AIDS virus because he was a heroin addict. And then my mother returned back home from her last bid at Clinton for about 3 to 6 months, and then she went into the hospital and she died of the AIDS virus. And in between those times of incarceration, my brother 1 year under me was sentenced to 35 to life plus 35 years for his involvement in those things that he did that they saw for whatever reason to sentence someone to 35 to life plus 35 years. And so shortly after my mother died of the AIDS virus, my one and only sister, between my father and my brother and my mother, she went and was incarcerated in the same women's penitentiary in New Jersey that my mother did her last bid. And so when we look at this whole issue, I've always asked the question, and I've always longed for my family. And so we look at this issue of mass incarceration. We look at this issue of families being torn apart. We look at this issue of this whole thing. As a child, as I used to sometimes, Brother Rob, I used to flip the coin and see and ask the question, which prison I'm going to visit on this weekend to see one of my parents or one of my siblings. And so I say that to say this, is that they became casualties of war, because I love and I honor my mother and father every day of my life. My father was my hero. My mother was my shero. And I never looked at my homelessness. I never looked at not having my father and or any of those issues in a negative. I looked at my parents and my brothers. They gave me their good. They deposit their good into me. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm a Watson. My family is Watsons. And the Watson family in Newark, New Jersey was no joke. So we were fighters. It didn't make no difference if you was on what side of the road. No matter what we put ourselves and our minds to, we go for the game. We go for the win. So we knew how to fight. So they taught me how to fight, but they taught me how to fight using my mind and my intellect and my spirit. But they also taught me to look to the creator of the heavens and the earth as I understood him. So I say that when I look at this whole ill condition that exists in our community, we have to come together and make a change. And that's why, if it's all right with you, Rob, that's why when me and Jim Brown, the Hall of Famer, the greatest football player that ever lived, we had our differences, but we partnered up for 8 years. And we did some great things in the penal institution. And then once Jim Brown was no longer in partnership with me, Martin Luther King III, the son of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, Queen Mother King, became in partnership with me and still in partnership with me to this very moment, because it is very critical that we begin to address this problem. And that's why when we were in New Jersey prison system, I knew what would make a difference in men and women and children's lives, because I done been there and I done it. So as a child always asks their parent, when you going to come home? And that cry of longing for their parent. And even those individuals who are incarcerated lone in the middle of the night. Killers. When nobody is looking, they put their face in the pillow and they start to cry because they long for the cry of their babies. And when they find out that something injustice have happened to their child, and it's the worst thing to incarcerate a person, and it's a worst thing to imprison a person. So when you imprison a person like that, and see, that's the other horrific side of all of this, and that is we got to begin to treat people as human beings and not as savages and dogs. And I'm not saying that some people don't need to be locked up. Huh?
Well, Brother Shahid, the statistics are high, and they're saying that out of 10 blacks, 4 to 5 of them will enter the prison system in some form of way. They say amongst Hispanics, the numbers are rising. And they're saying amongst white males, the numbers are very low. And I ask my question sometimes, is that an institutional thing or is that a racial thing?
I think that one of the things, whenever you see disparities in statistics and you look at the ethnic groups, it does raise the question of institutionalized racism and bigotry. I mean, the justice system has not always been in our favor at all. So let's not kid ourselves about that. I mean, one of the things is that when we went into the prisons in New Jersey, what people fail to understand is that for 12, 13 years, those who started off in our program that went through either when we were called the Mirror I Can program, and then we changed it to Life Skills program, and to now today, we're called the HER group for the Human Excellence Resource Group. But the fact of the matter is, our curriculum is highly effective. And they took three, let me tell you something, man. They took 3 some odd studies on our program. And they found out that our recidivism rate was 2.67% after 2 to 3 years of being released. 2.67% after 2 to 3 years of being released, and those who reoccurred or went back and got locked up was off of substance abuse or because they were unable to pay their fines. But their rate of recidivism, not only in New Jersey, but nationally, ranged between 38 to 42% within 6 months of being reincarcerated. So we became to create a different kind of energy and synergy within the prison system. And so therefore, I mean, just think about it. I mean, do they really want people to turn around and turn their lives around? I raised that question about these politicians because we have a product that is proven, evidence-based, that we can effectively change lives, and people will never return to prison. So when you have a product, and our product, we have a product. So when you have a product,
let me ask you this one, and I know about your product. And I facilitated your product, and I know your product work, and I've seen how gentlemen that I have touched have came back to me and told me how they changed their lives. But the one thing I want to ask is, there's a big conversation going on in this election, the 2020 presidential election. And one of the conversations is about mass incarceration. And they're talking about releasing some of these inmates who've been incarcerated for the Rockefeller laws. Some have reached 20 and 30 years for being drug dealers and who never committed violent crimes. How do you feel about that, and how do you see that playing out in this election?
I mean, one of the worst things that ever happened, and the mistakes that was made, even with Bill Clinton and the crime bill, because when he did the crime bill, we took issues regarding the crime bill, because at that same time, all of the Stop the Violence rallies were taking place across America. We were doing these gang summits that was being held from Chicago to Washington to Cleveland to Minneapolis and other places. So we were on the ground and recognized what was happening. And so when we look at this situation today and the results of it today, Rob, I'm not convinced. I mean, I'm not convinced by none of these candidates and their sound bites or their talking points that they are using when they start talking about mass incarceration, and they keep talking about policies, but no one is talking about helping to change a human being and the way they think and their thought process and how they can make the proper decisions that therefore they can, as we would say, eliminate the negative and establish the what? You establish the positive. So you got to establish that.
Well, one of the things that some of the politicians are saying that it's a cultural thing. And that they're saying that it's in our music and the way how the hip hoppers are treating being incarcerated as a medal of honor. And how do you see that? You know, we hear hip hop talk about murder, death, selling cocaine, and all that. All those things that pushes you towards the prison system.
Well, I mean. What you got to understand is this. I mean, the subliminal messages was in existence prior to these young men expressing their pain and suffering that they were existing in the hellholes of their community. I'm not gonna do this blaming the victim thing, but everybody shared in this in this situation. And the U.S. government, America, has the right to do something now because of these past legislations and laws that have shown to be evident that have been injustice in our community. And so it ain't about your color no more. It's about now, how do you begin to become lovers of humanity? And it's the most the humane thing to do is to begin to help these individuals change their life and come out and be productive, because they ain't gonna stay in the prisons forever. They're gonna return to the community. So if you treat them like dogs and savages inside, what you think they're going to do when they come out? They don't know nothing else.
So one of the things that what we talked about when we was doing these series, the call from the penitentiary, which this is the first series we're doing, and I'm thank you for being a part of it. But we talked about the psychological effect that is happening to the young people in the inner cities, how they talk about prison like it's okay. Like sometimes you go into the barbershop and, Raheem just did 30, just came home. We got to go get him some sneakers and give him a party. It's starting to become, is that a psychological effect?
Of course. Let me tell you something. The people are only a reflection of their community. And the people are only a reflection of his leadership. So if the leadership has no vision, then the people are lost. So we have to refocus our energy that we can create evolution instead of this revolving door called revolution. And you ain't doing nothing but going into a same generational cycle. And that sickness just continues to repeat itself. We need evolution to stop this cycle and a moving forward and advancement in our community. But it comes again into your thinking and your thoughts and how you going to make that happen. That's why we call the program now the Human Excellence Resource Group, because you got to teach people human excellence. And you got to change what it is that we so caught up in this sick materialism. We so caught up in this grandizement of negativity. So if you see someone talking righteous or talking correct, they like, I don't want to hear that. It's the same thing with the hip hop industry. The hip hop and rap started off as a positive conscious movement. And then we get away from it, that we treat our young ladies, this twerking and all this other crap that's going on today, and now you have moved away from what the guys back in my day, African Bambaataa and all the rest, and Poor Righteous Teachers and all the rest, and what they were spitting out, Public Enemy, and what they were spitting out consciousness. They were spitting out evolution. They were spitting out the advancement. But now today, we are so far removed from that. And back to these presidential candidates, man, I'm not impressed with none of this crap they talking, because they're not talking nothing real, and they have no real track record of real institutional prison reform on the local level. There's only so much that the first step can go, but until the states and local officials adopt these policies and bring them into existence. When the crime bill came out from Bill Clinton, they attached money to it. So if you didn't accept the crime bill, okay, and you didn't accept the laws from the crime bill, you didn't get federal dollars to come down into your cities. Well, that should be the same thing on this prison reform stuff. So when I hear these rappers who signing off and the owner of the New England Patriots, God bless them. They need to get these policies and legislation, but the work is on the ground. The work is going into these institutions, to which we have a tremendous, impressive track record and going into these institutions and begin to make a change, not only in the prison institutions for the adults, the juveniles, and you need to be proactive and on the preventive method on the front line, so you start to institute some of this stuff with these kids in the 3rd grade, the 4th grade, the 5th grade.
I know Jay-Z, Meek Mills, and the owner of the Patriots came together, and they raised millions of dollars towards mass incarceration and various other things. I believe they're talking about. I don't know the details, but one of the things, there's statistics are growing about our females, that our females are now being incarcerated at a high rate.
They had a rate of 600%. They had a rate of 600% of women being incarcerated. And back on that issue, what you just brought up about Jay-Z and the rest of them, man, they talking about some policy. Man, these brothers and sisters, I don't care what color they are in pain in these institutions. They want to do better. They want to change their life. You know, and one of the worst things for them in there, I'm being very honest, man, the police in there, man, what they do to inmates is just, man, some of the stuff they doing to these folks, man, will bring shame to Jim Crow. It will bring shame to them. But we let that go. We say, well, they did the crime, so they should, they should pay the time. Yeah, they did the crime. If you got them in the cell, okay, fine. But the inhumane treatment, when you start to not elevate people and change their hearts and change their mind and give them the ability to activate change, man, then they're going to come out doing the same stuff they did prior to, and they're going to come out even worse. So therefore, we have to change the way we doing this, and we have to be more proactive and outside of the box in our approach. And so I applaud them for what they're trying to do, but they're not talking to the real folks that know what really needs to take place.
So outside of just throwing away the key, we should create educational systems, life skill systems to better these inmates.
Well, we did more than just create life skills. See, there's a difference. When you say life skills, okay, that could be cooking. That could be hygiene. But when you start talking about human development, cognitive training, human development, now you're talking about the purity and the essence of a human being coming into that eye of themselves and activating those principles that can activate real change. Because you got to understand, when you talk about life skills, it's a question of crime. But when you talk about human development, now you're talking about uprooting what? Sin. So what we do, we talk about and activate the change in human beings so that they can uproot sin. Because once you uproot sin, you're not going to commit crime no more. You can commit crime and keep committing crime because you can do what? You can plea bargain and you can cut a deal with a lesser force. But when you come into that kind of excellence in yourself, you got to answer to something greater than yourself and greater than man. So if you're not operating and creating a situation on that plane, and if that's not your platform, and that's not the brand that you are carrying, to which we are carrying, then this vicious cycle will continue. There's a reason why our rate of recidivism for those who have gone through our training have been 2.67%. That's unheard of. And they kept doing the tests. So they kept doing these tests. They kept putting people, some of us would say they put spies, they put undercover, inmates in our training to see if it was really doing what it was doing. Yes, it was. So therefore, those kind of findings came out because we have in that something very uniquely different in our training methodology. And so when you talk about these individuals who are out here, they're not talking to the real folks that know how to actually make a difference, to bring about a change, because we got too much division And we got too much hatred, and we got too much selfishness, and we got too much ego going on that they edging God out and not keeping him in. So we have to begin to bring about the necessary changes in our society, in our communities, but on the local level, as they always say, all politics is local. So if these local governors and these local state officials do not begin to talk about this kind of change, man, there's some things that's gonna that's gonna come on the horizon that they're gonna be sad that they did not get out in front of it to prevent it from happening.
So, Brother Shahid, I hear you, and I hear you, and what you're saying is prevalent and it's much needed. They are incarcerating these. How do we, like I have a son, and how do we teach our sons to be careful when, when as a young black boy or young Hispanic boy get pulled over, he's being dealt with by these racial cops who sometimes those situations turn into a night in jail or even sometimes
death. May even turn into death.
So how do we, just talking about mass incarceration, I mean, you hear story after story of young gentlemen coming home at 55 or 60 years old who's incarcerated with wrongful charges. I mean, how do we teach our young boys? Like, I understand preparing guys who are already incarcerated, but how do we prepare our young gentlemen from hitting that way?
I mean, one of the things that there's a brother out of we went during the gang summits. We talked about different tactics and techniques to use and things in that nature, and how to develop better community relationships or community policing and working with the local police departments in those particular districts, especially where crime is rampant, and we have seen these kind of situations occur where it's questionable how people were arrested, it's questionable how and why a police officer discharged his gun. I mean, one of the things I go back, even in Newark, New Jersey, we dealt with a situation in Newark, New Jersey once where a young baby, she was 16 years old, lived on Martin Luther King Boulevard, which used to be High Street in Newark, New Jersey, and she got into a truck, a van, with these young men, and her name was Tasha Mays, and she went for a joyride, and they went from Newark over to Hillside, over Elizabeth Avenue, and in Hillside, and the police shot 70 rounds into the van, and it was a stolen van, and they didn't shoot anybody, but they knew that the van was stolen, and this baby, Tasha Mays, was killed. We look at individuals all throughout our community, and we can go to, the Garner's case. We can look at plenty of others that we have spoken out very strongly of, but we started to create, when I'm saying we started to create and educate people on what to do when approached by the police. I mean, from tactics of if you pull over, turn your car off. Before you turn it off, roll down your window, turn the music off, and put your hands on the steering wheel. And yes, sir, no, sir, polite. Don't. I mean, you not, we may not like this, but the reality is that they stop white people different than they stop black people. White people will challenge police officers. What'd you put me over for? What you do this for? But I done seen police treat black elderly people, elderly women, in a very inhumane that they would never treat their elderly people in their community. But that's just the reality that exists. So I believe in strong, positive law enforcement. And there are some people that are not too good in terms of how they interact with our community. And the other thing is we created this ID card that if you lived in that community, And if the young men were pulled over, the young ladies were pulled over by the police, that police department was aware of these ID cards. So we created these ID cards for people to give to the police officer along with their driver's license to let them know that they were involved in the local community police relationship operation. So therefore, the police knew that this individual knows how to interact. This individual was not a threat to the police officer or what have you. So we always try to teach them to try to be as humble as you can, be as respectful as you can. If you know your rights and you know you're not dirty, just put your hands on the steering wheel, have your license and registration available. If they tell you for your license, tell them, officer, I'm going to go into my glove compartment is where my wallet is, and I like to get my registration and my license out. Can I reach over into my glove compartment? I have no gun. And one of the newest things is, especially with phones today, turn on your phone, call somebody, keep it on speaker, let them hear the exchange. You remain relaxed. You remain calm. And so when you get into a point where you want to challenge those with that kind of authority, until somebody has to be calm, so you need to be calm so you don't provoke something. So we have to educate people more on how to interact with the police, and we have to educate the police that's coming into our community, and we need to educate them in the academy. And by doing that, we hope and pray that they will be more sensitive to the people in the community that they are patrolling. And the sad thing is, they don't live in that community, so that also makes it a challenge.
Brother Shahid, I want to say thank you. It's kind of in a time. This is a one episode of Far from the Penitentiary, where we're going to be talking.
I can't hear you, brother. Can't hear you.
I just want to say thank you for calling in and talking about mass incarceration. This is a 10-part series. We're going to be talking about talking to individuals like yourself, and we're also going to be talking to gentlemen who are doing life sentences in the penitentiary, directly from the penitentiary, and how it affects them and how it affects our community from a psychological standpoint. I thank you for your point and your views and sharing your life. And I look forward to talking to you again. And thank you for coming on.
Well, I want to thank you and your listening audience for giving me this opportunity. And I pray and hope that something that I said